I'm Steve Wilmus, and today we're talking about science safety at San Francisco USD. We're going to cover safety plans, some of the common safety hazards, how to store chemicals, how to inventory those chemicals, science resources, safety data sheets, and a bunch more goodies. So let's dive in. Science is fun. We get to work with fire and chemicals, make things hot and cold, make things disappear and magically appear. But that fun can also be very dangerous. In fact, next to woodshop and automotive classrooms, science classrooms injure just as many students and staff each year. It's your responsibility to keep our students and fellow staff safe. So let's take a look at the foundation of science safety, and that's 4 main safety plans: the IIPP, bloodborne pathogens, hazard communication, and the chemical hygiene plan. The IIPP, or the Injury Illness Prevention Plan, addresses general safety throughout our district. The plan assists us in identifying and evaluating workplace hazards and outlines a process for correcting hazards when we find them, which is to fix them if we can. And if we can't, then we need to isolate them and notify buildings and grounds or risk management. The IIPP is also the basis for the district's safety committee and basic safety training programs. Our next plan is bloodborne pathogens, or BBP, which addresses how we deal with items which may be contaminated with blood or other potentially infectious materials. This plan helps to prevent diseases such as HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C by using personal protective equipment and properly disinfecting contaminated surfaces. The BBP plan is particularly important if you are conducting blood typing experiments or cleaning up blood, or OPIM. The BBP also requires syringes, pipettes, broken glass to be properly disposed of in sharps containers with the biohazardous label. Remember, you should never ever pick up syringes or broken glass with your bare hands. That's just asking for trouble. Our third safety program is the Hazard Communication Plan, which covers all employees at San Francisco Unified. It addresses safety data sheets, chemical labels, disposal of chemicals, and communication of chemical hazards. As a science instructor, you should be familiar with this plan and our fourth plan, which is the Chemical Hygiene Plan. The Chemical Hygiene Plan, or the CHP, is similar to the Hazard Communication Plan, except that it applies specifically to science laboratories. The CHP spells out the requirements for identifying hazards, conducting annual inventories, employee training, maintenance of safety data sheets, personal protective equipment, how to safely store chemicals, how to label chemicals, fume hood inspections, how to handle hazardous waste, how to report accidents, and how to control spills. Recently, California adopted the globally harmonized system for classification and labeling of chemicals known as GHS. GHS is part of the Hazard Communication and the Chemical Hygiene Plan and is being implemented in phases over the next couple of years. By June of 2016, GHS will be in full effect, requiring everyone to be trained on any new chemical hazards, secondary labeling, and the new safety data sheet format. By December 1st of 2015, all material safety data sheets will be written in the new 16-section safety data sheet format. Before we discuss safety data sheets, if you haven't reviewed these safety programs, point your web browser to the SFUSD's Science Safety or Risk Management website and download them now. You're probably familiar with MSDSs, or Material Safety Data Sheets, but under the GHS regulations, these MSDSs will now be referred to as Safety Data Sheets and follow a predefined format containing 16 sections. GHS also changed labeling components and requirements. This standardization will make it much easier to find the information you are looking for, especially when going from one chemical to the next. The HAZCOM and the Chem Hygiene regulations requires SDSs to be kept for all hazardous chemicals that have been on your site, whether they're currently in use or not. You should have SDSs available to you in hard copy or electronically at all times. If you're missing an SDS, can't find it, or simply are unfamiliar with the location of your safety data sheets, then ask the chemical hygiene officer or your science safety chair following this training. The CHP and HAZCOM standards also require chemicals to be labeled. Labels must contain the name and product, any associated hazards, and the manufacturer's name and contact information. In addition, if you place the chemical into a secondary container, that container also must contain a label with the name of the product and its associated hazards. The new labeling requirements under GHS provide several new label elements and make it easier to quickly determine what you're dealing with. Each label will contain a pictogram, the signal word, a hazard statement, a precautionary statement, product identification information, and supplier and manufacturer information. As you can see, the label will look similar to this. This label has been designed to provide you with all the information you need at a quick glance. Let's take a quick look at the 9 basic pictograms which will be used on the new GHS label. The health hazard pictogram indicates carcinogens and mutagens and respiratory sensitizers. The flame pictogram represents flammables. The exclamation mark pictogram indicates irritants and skin sensitizers. The gas cylinder represents gas cylinders or gases under pressure. The corrosion pictogram represents corrosion, eye damage, and corrosive to metals. The exploding bomb pictogram represents explosives, self-reactives, and organic peroxide. The flame over a circle represents oxidizers. Environment represents hazards to the aquatic environment. And the skull and crossbones represents acute toxicity. In addition to the pictogram, the label will inform you of the personal protective equipment or PPE that you must use when handling the chemical. It's important to understand how to protect yourself and your students from chemical hazards, so let's take a look at some of the PPE. As you already are well aware, working with chemicals requires protection. This includes gloves, respirators, aprons, safety glasses or goggles, and the like. This is called personal protective equipment or PPE. There are many types of personal protective equipment available to you. Some of the most common include safety glasses, safety goggles, gloves, aprons, and shoes. It is important to understand when to use certain PPE, such as safety glasses versus safety goggles. Safety glasses should be utilized when hazards of flying debris are coming toward you in a head-on direction. Safety glasses with side shields can be utilized when flying debris is angular, meaning it is coming at you from the sides or slightly from behind you. Anytime liquids or dust may come over, under, and around your safety glasses, you should step up the level of protection and wear safety goggles. Safety goggles can be utilized by directly placing them on your face or over your reading glasses or your safety glasses. Just as not all chemicals are compatible with all other chemicals, not all gloves are compatible with all chemicals. You should read the safety data sheets to determine which specific type of glove is compatible with the chemicals you are working with. Some chemicals may require latex, natural rubber, nitrile, or other chemical-resistant gloves. Chemical-resistant aprons should be utilized anytime chemicals have the potential to splash you on your body, and aprons are great because they can easily be removed quickly if you do splash something on your body. Whereas if you're wearing pants, you might be embarrassed to remove them. In addition, your shoes should be able to resist the chemicals that you are working with in the event that you spill the chemicals onto your feet. When it comes to schools and science, there are a ton of regulations that we must comply with. This includes Cal-OSHA, California's Health and Safety Code, CUPA, State Fire Marshal, Education Code, Building Code, and much more. Keeping it all straight can be tough, and that's where the California Science Safety Handbook comes in handy. The handbook was recently updated in 2012 and includes a ton of useful information, like an expanded list of regulations, how to set up your classroom, how to store chemicals, and it breaks out the hazards in the various sciences, chemistry, biology, and physics. It also gives a list of chemicals that you should watch out for in your classrooms. If you don't have a copy of the California Science Safety Handbook, I would suggest downloading one by visiting the San Francisco USD's Science Safety website. One of the things that the handbook is extremely helpful with is identifying chemicals for removal. The 2012 version has Appendix I, which identifies 3 groups of chemicals for removal: retrograde materials, chemicals for immediate or prompt removal and disposal, and chemicals which are subject to regular removal and disposal or are approaching their shelf life because they pose a significant threat to the health and safety of teachers, staff, and students. All 3 of these types of chemicals should be monitored closely and removed from classrooms on an annual basis through a process known as a chemical sweep. Chemical sweeps are an important process and should be performed on an annual basis, along with the annual chemical inventory. In many respects, the chemical sweep is the first step in the chemical management program. As science instructors, we should be seeking ways to minimize waste, and that starts by maintaining only what we can use in 1 to 2 school years. Having more chemicals on hand than you truly need creates storage issues and ultimately waste disposal issues. When our classrooms have too many chemicals stored in them, the chances of spills increases because we don't have the proper storage capacity and we try to make things fit where they otherwise wouldn't. To remove chemicals from your classroom, just follow the hazardous waste removal procedure by completing the waste removal form, which is located on SFUSD's Science Safety website. Once you have performed the chemical sweep, an inventory of your chemicals should be performed. This inventory will assist buildings and grounds and risk management in completing the hazardous material business plan and the SIRS information. So let's take a look at how to store chemicals. Once you have your inventory, chemicals should be properly segregated and stored. Chemicals should be stored by compatibility, not alphabetically. Storing chemicals by alphabetical order increases the likelihood that chemicals will mix and result in fire or explosion. Chemicals should be stored on shelving which was properly designed to contain chemicals. This means that it is resistive to leaks that may occur. Chemical storage should have a lip or a ledge on the shelf to prevent chemicals that have leaked from migrating to other areas of the storage unit or even the classroom. Lips and ledges also help prevent chemicals from falling during earthquakes, and all shelving units over 3 feet tall should be secured to the wall or anchored to the floor. If you don't have proper shelving, then you should use a chemical resistant container and store those chemicals in that container, and then that container should be stored on your shelf. You should also put in a work order to have your shelving evaluated by B&G. Let's go over some of the other safety equipment that should be available in your lab. Proper ventilation for storage areas, fume hoods, eye wash and shower stations, fire blankets, safety glasses and goggle sterilizers, as well as fire extinguishers, flammable cabinets, and acid cabinets should be available to you depending on the labs and the experiments you are running. Some equipment such as your fume hoods require an annual certification to ensure that they are working properly, which means the hood is drawing the appropriate amount of air through the exhaust ventilation. You should also be able to locate a sticker on the fume hood indicating that it has been tested and certified for use. If it hasn't, or you can't find the sticker, again, put in a work order for B&G to look at it. Eye wash and shower stations should also be inspected monthly. These should be turned on or flowed to make sure the water is fresh and free of rust and other debris. Before you flow the station, make sure you have a bucket or drain to catch all that water. In addition, fire extinguishers should be inspected on a monthly basis to ensure that they are properly charged and the unit is not damaged. Each fire extinguisher has a hang tag, which is completed by site personnel each month. Monthly fire extinguisher inspections are quick and easy and can be performed by just about anybody. I would recommend that you check your fire extinguisher on a daily basis. Just take a quick look at the gauge to make sure that the needle is in the green area and not the red. You also want to make sure that the hose is still there and that there's a safety pin which is secured in place. If any of these are missing, contact B&G immediately to have your fire extinguisher replaced. There may be times when you need to use a fire extinguisher in your classroom. Using a fire extinguisher is simple, but there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. First, don't get too close to the fire. This may result in the fire extinguisher pressure spreading the burning materials to other locations of your classroom, creating a much bigger fire than you can manage. Secondly, remain calm and aim the fire extinguisher at the base of the fire, not the flames. Fire extinguishers work by blanketing the fuel and separating it from oxygen. To use your fire extinguisher, just remember the simple acronym PASS. PASS stands for pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. That's pull the pin, aim the nozzle, squeeze the handle, and sweep from left to right or right to left at the base of the fire until it is extinguished. Take a look at some common science safety issues. Blocked exits are a very common safety hazard. You should never block an exit, as this may be the only way out of a burning building. Keep aisles and pathways free and clear of debris, extension cords, desks, chemical carts, and other obstructions. Don't place items in front of electrical panels, eye wash stations, fire blankets, or fire extinguishers. These tools are designed to help prevent injury and keep you safe. If you need these in an emergency and you can't get to them, you could be in real danger. Here's a little known fact. Building codes and fire code require that no more than 10% of classroom wall space be covered in flame retardant paper or decorative art materials. When calculating wall space, you must include windows and doors. Try to keep your wall coverage to a minimum because it really is a fire hazard, and fire departments, including the San Francisco Fire Department, must enforce that 10% rule. Overloaded surge protectors and extension cords are another hazard. Any electrical device in the classroom should be grounded, meaning that it has a 3-prong plug, much like you would find on your computer's power cord. In addition, Cal OSHA requires that extension cords can only be used on a temporary basis, which means 30 days or less. So if you need an appliance on a permanent basis, contact B&G to have them review your electrical needs. Another fire hazard is storing too many boxes and papers. Get rid of what you can. Just make sure you follow the district's record retention policy, and remember, safety data sheets should be kept for at least 30 years. Slips and falls rank in the top 3 workplace accidents every year. Science classrooms have all types of liquids and other small materials that can easily find their way onto the floor, creating a slip and fall hazard. Make sure that you keep your walking and working surfaces clean and free of any debris. And you should always make sure to clean up spills as soon as possible. Some chemicals, such as mercury, require specialized cleanup procedures and must be handled with extreme caution. If mercury is spilled, you may need to evacuate the classroom before conducting spill response. One way to prevent mercury spills is to remove mercury-containing devices or substitute them with less hazardous devices. Another common injury is cuts and punctures from trying to force glass rods through stoppers. If you need to insert a rod through a stopper, lube it up and make sure that the hands are out of the way. You should also grip the rod close to the stopper to even out the pressure on the rod. Specimens can be another hazard if they contain formaldehyde or formalin. Both are generally no longer acceptable in K-12 environments and should be substituted with low toxicity preservatives. If you are ordering specimens for dissection, you should always opt for the low toxicity preservative. If specimens are only available in formalin or formaldehyde, then you should consider a different dissection lesson or specimen. Any formaldehyde waste should be disposed of properly, and any spills should be cleaned up using the proper cleanup procedures. Another serious and often overlooked safety hazard is food. Food and drinks can absorb chemicals quickly and invisibly. For this reason, food should not be allowed in any science classroom. You wouldn't want to eat or drink items which have been contaminated with carcinogens or mutagens, and you shouldn't let your students either. Refrigerators and microwaves should be properly labeled to prevent food and drink heating. Also, you should remind students not to bring food and drinks into the classroom, even if it is in their backpacks. Another big safety concern in science classrooms is broken, damaged, or malfunctioning equipment. When safety and lab equipment does not function properly, the risk of injury rises. If you encounter any broken or damaged safety or lab equipment, you should take it out of service and replace it as soon as possible. I also recommend securing equipment and tools in locked cabinets to prevent accidental injury. I know that this can create some inconvenience, but the benefits of safety far outweigh the inconvenience of the time lost locking and unlocking those cabinets. Working alone when using chemicals or hazardous equipment is never a good idea, and you should never let students work alone in a lab. If you must work alone, at least let someone know what you're doing and when you will be finished. We've covered most of the physical and equipment hazards. Now let's look at some of the personal hazards that staff and students may encounter in the lab. Long hair and loose clothing should be put up and secured out of the way. It can catch fire, block your vision, knock things over, and even fall into flasks. Flip-flops and shorts are not good attire for working around chemicals. You should always wear clothing that covers as much of your body as possible to prevent contact with chemicals. Laziness is a real problem in the lab, especially when it comes to not understanding the chemicals you are working with. Reviewing safety data sheets before you are using any chemicals is a must, especially for students. You should know what to do if an emergency takes place. Smelling chemicals is a bad idea, and so is tasting them. If you really need to know what a chemical smells like, wafting is the preferred method. Wafting dilutes the chemical concentration and gives you a better chance at surviving the contact. Pipettes are designed for use with a pump. Never pipette with your mouth, and if you don't have a pipette to move liquid from one container to the next, you can pour the liquids. Just do it with purpose so the liquid doesn't run down the side of the container. Disposal of chemicals should always be performed by approved methods. Don't dump chemicals down the sinks as this can lead to reactions that can result in fire, explosions, and even poisonous gases, not to mention damage to the environment. Make sure you know how to dispose of chemicals before you ever start to use them. Keeping our students safe is very important, and the best way to do that is to make sure they're aware of the hazards in the lab. SFUSD has created a student science safety test and science safety contract to make students and parents aware of the hazards they may encounter. At the beginning of each school year, you should review the science safety test and student contract prior to performing laboratory experiments with the students. Students who do not pass the science safety test should not be allowed to participate in the laboratory experiments until they are able to pass the test. Before we go, let's talk about something you may have to deal with during your career as a science instructor, and that is fires, spills, and other emergencies. Prior to dealing with emergencies, you should become familiar with your personal capabilities and your level of comfort in dealing with emergencies. If an emergency does arise that is beyond your capabilities, you should evacuate the room and contact 911. Make sure to complete a written incident report anytime an emergency situation has occurred. This gives risk management, B&G, and the chemical hygiene officer information on how to prevent future incidents from occurring. Emergencies are great lessons and should be shared with other staff members and students so they know what to do if they encounter a similar situation. We've covered a lot of information in today's training, and I wanted to thank you for your time today and remind you as we go back into our science classrooms to think about safety, not only for yourself, but for your students and the rest of the staff at the school site. Have a wonderful day and a safe school year.